depending on what method you've chosen or what starting point and projects you want to undertake. It's very important that you do this measuring, because what happens otherwise, and what happened in the UK, was that lots of people would do a project once a year, maybe on World Environment Day or at the end of the school year when things calmed down a bit, and they felt that would be enough. And until you measure and start to see what impact that is having on your students, you can't actually say whether you're becoming more sustainable either as a campus or in the curriculum, or how you link with the community. So it's very important you think about that. And there are some tools out there which I will highlight later. For some reason I'm not... Okay, here we go. Top tips number 6. One of the important things is just to keep looking for connections and ask questions. And the questions that you ask, both in the classroom and of the school, are really important. Okay, so for example, some of the best schools keep asking the question that's based on the more concept. So they just keep trying to do more. So how can we reduce our energy more? Where are we losing energy? Can we do things a different way? And the best one that I really like is the what if question. So what this leads to is a lot of creativity. This is, what if we tried doing this? What would happen? And why this is a very important question is, the final way of how we live and work sustainably has not been yet worked out, because we are in our own action learning, both locally, globally, as teachers, and within our own schools. So the what if question is all about experimenting, trying something different, trying something new. And that's a very important concept to model to the students as well, because I think trying to giving them the wrong impression that it's all sorted will really not do them a favor in the long run. Top tip number 7, and this sounds really, as we say in North America they say, get a no-brainer, but actually I've done this with groups of teachers, and initially they thought, yes, of course the students are fully participating, but what I mean by participating is that they maybe work on projects that they're interested in, that they have the motivation to do, or questions or issues that they really want to find out more about, rather than it being set by someone else. And what happens is that improves motivation, it improves learning, all sorts of things come out of that. Top tip number 8 is make it visual and share it. Really bring it out, make it a big visual and very front and center part of your school, and share that, make it transparent. Your ethos, your plans, your successes, how you're monitoring. And what that leads to is engagement of more of the school, more of the students, more of the parents, and overwhelming more interest and motivation. And what that does for you as a school is it sustains your work. So instead of it all being left to one champion, the whole thing starts to have a life of its own. Make it visual. This is some of the things that we've done at some of the SEED conferences. And anytime you make something visual, people are really fascinated and intrigued by it. This is a very temporary one, but any kind of display board or public thing that we do is really important. This is a really important one. Lots of people think they understand change. So top tip number 9 is about understanding change, and actually how people change their minds and how people change their behaviors is actually quite complicated. The one thing that we know has never brought about change is giving people knowledge and leaving it at that. If all you do is give people knowledge, that won't lead to change. It might lead to some awareness raising, but awareness does not lead to changes in behavior. In fact, a little bit of knowledge has been proved by research to be almost the reverse. A little bit of knowledge can give people such an overwhelming sense of the impossibility of doing this that they do even less than they did before. So it's very important that you understand change. And there are some fantastic models out there. And one in particular that I use is called the cycle of change. and you can Google it. Very easy to find, and I've been using that a lot in teacher training and in schools and with organizations, and it's very easy and useful to use. And finally, top tip number 10 is, and it seems also really obvious and very sensible, this is about supporting your teachers' learning, about sustainability and education for sustainable development. And find out who can help you with your journey in becoming a more sustainable school and embedding it in everything that you do, both curriculum and campus. There are people out there to help you, and it's important that you reach out and get as much help as possible. It could be professional development, it could be a whole range of other things. So here are the 10 top tips in summary. And one of the ways that you can really move forward doing those top tips is to use something like a framework or a development framework. So here are just 3 examples that we use in the UK. There is an Eco Schools Award scheme, which is a really great place to start your work. A more complicated one is the Sustainable Schools Framework, which SEED now has on its website, because the UK government is not doing it anymore. And we have a Sustainable Schools Alliance that's encouraging people to do it. We've included now a 9th doorway, which is on biodiversity. And this is very popular around the world. One of the things I helped develop when I was at WWF UK is a framework called Pathways to Education for Sustainable Development, and lots of people have used it. Here are some web links. I will, if you have problems linking with these, I'll give you some updated links later. So that's the end of the first part of the presentation, and back to you if you have any questions. We cannot hear them.
Hi, Ann.
Yes.
Again, sorry for the bad connection that we had some minutes earlier. We lost some people in that moment, but we still have some participants who have connected again.
Okay.
At this moment, we don't have any questions from participants, but please, I would encourage everyone to write your questions, your comments, your views using the chat. And the chat is at the top of your screen. You can see that there is a button which says chat. You can write all your questions there. And perhaps I can, while people are thinking their questions and maybe their comments, I can ask you a couple of questions. We have, as I said before, perhaps people who connected after didn't listen to this, but upstairs we have a group of teachers and school managers who are gathered today to listen to this presentation, but also to start thinking about what projects they want to implement as part of the Sustainability Club initiatives that we're leading from here, from RCE Penang. And I think that it would be really useful for them if you could perhaps, I don't know if you know of any specific initiative which is similar in the UK of people setting up their own clubs with students from different ages and starting looking at projects that students can do. And also, I would like to ask you whether what are the ways that you think that RCE Penang can support them more effectively, or to schools and teachers, so they can implement all these projects?
Okay. When I was teaching in Australia, one lunchtime, the students came to me. I was a maths teacher, and the students came to me and they said, we need your help. I said, okay, what's the maths problem? And they said, no, it's not maths. We've been running an environment group. And I went, oh, I didn't know that. And they said, yeah, we have. But what's happening, and the students started it themselves. And they said to me, what's been happening is we are getting very depressed. We're getting very upset about the planet and all of the environmental problems, and we don't know what to do about it. So could you come and help us? And I said, yeah, of course I can. And so the important thing, I think, is start with what they're interested in or worried about, and work with them in discussions about what they could start to try and do. And I think as as a teacher or school managers, first of all, I think you want to give some legitimacy to the group, the council or a self-forming group that's interested. And one way that you can give them legitimacy is ask them to report to a staff meeting, or if you have a school governors meeting, so that their work is acknowledged and is not just sort of pushed to the side. The second thing I've seen that's worked really, really well, and this did work with the school that I was teaching in Sydney, was what happened was they decided that they wanted to do two projects in particular. One was they realized there was a lot of paper being wasted in the school. There was a school printer, and he would actually cut off bits of paper. And they went and looked at his work, and they thought about all of the paper that was being wasted, and they thought how they might actually work on that. And one of the things that they did was they started making paper, but also with the cut-offs, they made little notepads. And by the time I left, they had made 1,000 Australian dollars. So the biggest problem was they didn't know how to spend that. And to think about how you want to spend it ethically and environmentally was a really big learning project for them. The second thing they learned was that they wanted to do recycling in the school, and no recycling company would do a school because they said children and students could not be trusted to recycle properly. Unbelievable. And it so angered the school, the environment group, that they took 2 years to finally find an organization to do this. Now, this is the kind of work that, you know, it's not like a project, it's an action learning project. And it can take 2, 3, 4 years until they can finally convince people to do something. And as teachers, we should support them and keep going. It is not an easy win sometimes. So there were sort of 3 things there. You know, I think them either making their own money or being given a budget and being asked to manage that for environmental things within the school is really important. Some technology university schools that I've looked at, the boys have actually, there's one, it's not that far from me, about an hour's drive away, called Skinner's School. And they do amazing work. The boys actually have convinced solar panel installers and companies that they want to see the solar panels. They don't want them on the roof where no one can see them. They want to see them, and it's possible to do it. And they made a company change their minds because it was so important to the boys that not just the club knew what was happening with sustainability, but the whole of the school knew what was happening. So, you know, to me, the big thing is support. Support them as a group, support them to think about change, support them in their learning, perhaps support them with some funding, and really let the group decide what they want to work on. But be aware that if they don't get involved in something practical, they may start to get a bit depressed. And, you know, you need to actually work on that.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I think that I get from you that it's important to listen to the students' ideas, the group ideas, to find ways of acknowledging what they're doing, and also to support this action learning project, isn't it? We have 2 questions coming from the teachers who are actually attending the meeting here at the University of Malaysia. Actually, you can find them in the chat, so perhaps it's easy that you read them. The first question, it says, how do we push home the facts, which I guess that it's, how do we push home the sustainability agenda and help the children act on a way they already know? So you can read this question on the chat. And also there is a second question, which is, just now Anne said that awareness does not get people to change. So what projects can we do to catch the student interest, which is not about awareness raising?
Okay, I can't see the questions for some reason, but let me do the last one first. I think the answer is action learning. I think the answer is to give them something real and relevant and support them in working on something useful like that. The awareness raising, it surprised me as well, because in many national parks around the world, they follow a model called understanding, awareness, anyway, so 3 U's and an A, assuming that understanding would lead to, and awareness would lead to action. And there has been no research that proves that. In fact, there's been research to the opposite. So the way around that is you start with action. So you have a little bit of knowledge, but you actually start with action. And then the trick within a school, and it's not really a trick. You think it's really obvious, but we don't always do this. We don't link a project to the learning that the students are going through in the classroom. So if you can make that link between the students and the work, that's really important. I'm not sure, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you, yes. And I think that your response was very clear about action learning projects. And
the first question again, could you?
The first question, okay, I'll read it and I'll give you my interpretation. So it says like this: how do we push home the facts and help the children act on a way what they already know? So I think that this question is more about the relationships between the school and home, and how children can take home what they already learn at school on sustainability.
Okay, there has been some research done on this in Europe by a guy called Professor David Uzzell, and Uzzel, really interesting man at the University of Surrey. And a lot of people in Europe call it pester power. They think that if children learn about something, they can go home and they can convince their parents to do it. And it turns out that doesn't work all the time. It only works when you have children who have a relationship in their family where they're allowed to be the teacher. They're allowed to share their ideas. There's a lot of conversation that goes on in the school, in the home, but it doesn't work across all homes because parenting styles differ, cultures differ, and so that doesn't always work. The best things I've seen are when you make an intergenerational project. So instead of thinking about the children taking home a message, you create a project in the school or in the community which involves the grandparents, the children. Often it's grandparents and children that is the best link because they are more used to listening to each other and thinking about sustainability over time and how things used to be, I think, is a really powerful thing. One of the things I saw that was a fantastic model was using maps of your area and aerial photographs if you can, and the children interview their grandparents or other older people in the community, and they talk about how the community has changed over time, and they start a conversation about sustainability, and that draws in parents and then other people, and then from there you can start building some projects together. And that was the most powerful thing I ever saw. And it really is about intergenerational equity as well. And that is something that's so important in sustainability. This is not just about children being messengers. This is about children working with their community.
That's excellent, and I really love also the projects which are intergenerational projects. And I think that the initiative about the sustainability clubs is going to be also quite interesting in the sense that also students from different ages will come together to think about their sustainability project. And definitely it would be very nice if they can connect with their communities and perhaps, do some kind of interviews with grandparents or with older generations. So that would be a nice idea for all these teachers to think about. There is a third question, Anne. I don't know if we want to save this one for the end or or you think we have time now to respond to this one?
Yes, if you can read it to me, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So the question number 3 says, is changing people's mindset part of sustainability because it is not easy to make people change? So I think it's about changing people's mindset and how to make people change. There's more the change approach.
I wish I had the answer. I think lots of people, would like to have that answer, because if it was easy, it would have happened already. So helping people change is a very, very hard thing to do. The best tricks are, if you like, that it has to be fun. People have to enjoy being part of that change. They don't want to do it on their own. It would be much better if they were doing it with other people. So if there's a group of you working together, so you could have a street and a whole street decides that they want to reduce their energy use, for example, or grow more food, or recycle more, or have less waste. And when you take it on a street level or a community level or a village, it works better. And more people are engaged then, because we are social animals and we like to work together. I've seen some people do it in their churches, so maybe through the mosques, that kind of idea would work really well. So that's the second thing, so it's got to be fun, you've got to do it together. Some people think it's got to be easy. You've got to have an easy place to start. You don't want to make it so hard that you give up. And that's a really crucial point. And it isn't always about starting with knowledge. Sometimes it doesn't even have to sound like sustainability. You don't even have to use the word sustainability. It can be part of sustainability, but it's something that you just start moving. And once you've got people working together, change becomes a little easier. Changing people's minds is all about creating new neural pathways in their heads. And the thing is, there's some really fantastic work being done here in the UK on universal values. So what are the values that we all have? And we do. We have them all over the world. We all have the same sets of values. And there's a lot of them, but they basically are the same. So you can look up, if you Google the word common cause, there's a free downloadable booklet that helps you look at these. And the important thing is to realize that some people, all of us actually, can hold two opposing values inside ourselves at the same time. So you could be very interested in saving money, for example, and at the same time want to save the planet. That's nothing to do with money. And those two seem to be in opposition, but you can hold those two together. So even though some people say, yes, but I can't do this, no, I can't do it, it's just about keeping going and getting people started. And that's the best. There are lots of change models out there, but to be honest, the one that I think works best is the cycle of change. And it's absolutely about sustainability, because we are living more and more unsustainably. So we have to change something.
Thank you, Anne. I see we have plenty of questions now. Would you like to, should we continue with the questions? I would like to read you one, which is not from the teacher, because the teachers at the university are very active. They have lots of questions. I think that they're starting to see their projects, and they have plenty. But there's one from Wakana from Thailand, who says, how do you get school principals or people with decision-making power to buy in to support sustainability development of the school and don't see it as an add-on activities to do, especially with the school where they're focused very much on academics?
Okay, do you know where I would start? I would start with a survey of the pupils. Ask them what interests and worries and concerns they have, and what sort of things do they want to learn about. There was a survey done here by an organisation called the Cooperative, which is actually one of the biggest retailers in the UK. And they surveyed over 1,000 students across the whole of the UK in a representative way with a market research company. And they were aged 7 to 14. And they asked these pupils what did they want to learn about at school. And they all said maths and English. And third, 80% of them said they wanted to learn about global issues. 80%. And that's before they learned about, art and music and drama and sport and, all the fun things that you think it goes into school. They want to learn about global issues. And you take that evidence back to your senior management team, your principals, and say, if this is what they want, we can achieve so much more in terms of learning because they will be more motivated, they will be stimulated, and the evidence is global now that once students are motivated, all sorts of other learning starts to flow from that, and academic performance even is improved across all groups. So start with a survey of the students. If you want, do a survey of the parents. Maybe do a survey of businesses as well. And if you can't find those, someone somewhere will have done one for you. So that could be something that RCE Penang could do for the schools.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ann. So what would you like to do? Would you like me to continue reading the different questions, or would you like to show the other small presentation?
Yeah, I'll do the next bit of the presentation, then we can do some more questions, yeah?
That's good, thank you.
All right. So, okay, great. Okay, so what I'm now going to show you is a presentation that we did for the United Arab Emirates, who wanted to develop a sustainability curriculum and integrate it into their revised national curriculum. And I worked with a company called Talek Alexander Stubbs, who's actually on the board of my charity. So what I'm going to show you is some of the things that we did. There was quite a lot of background information and research, as I've been talking about already, that we wanted to show people. This is the final presentation that we did to the Minister of Education, and showed the participatory process that we went through. We worked with the Ministry of Education staff over several workshops that were quite high-powered. There's no fully integrated sustainability curriculum yet, and one of the things we said to the UAE is you might be one of the first. I think that's beginning to happen. And we did a lot of workshops to try and design this process. So we did it in a number of phases, and phase 3 has still to happen, where this is supporting teachers and developing the implementation strategies. But what we have developed so far is a process guide. So it explains to the UAE Ministry of Education how you undertake a process that helps teachers and schools embed this in their practice. We then created a high-level sustainability map as well. And this is based on a really famous document that was called The Big Picture in the UK, and was really well received. And you'll see that it starts with the top. What are we trying to achieve? How might we organize learning? And then evaluating how well are we achieving our aims. And I think I've covered those in the first map. So this is how we started to do it. And we created a background one. In one of the workshops, we then asked people to start to add to the draft one their ideas in here. And this is part of the participatory process that we went through. But one of the things you can see is that we looked at approaches to learning. We thought about cross-curriculum areas. We looked at components. and we started to move them to thinking about inquiry-based projects. We then created a map like this, which is navigational, so you were able to then link from each of these blue highlighted areas into something that would help you. So, for example, approaches to learning, socially critical thinking, you could link to an outline with some examples of how to do that, outdoor community learning, systems thinking, action learning, future thinking, participatory approaches, and understanding change were the approaches to learning that we wanted to do. We said that the lesson plan should be designed by teachers, but the action learning inquiry projects, what they came up with, these 5 topics that were very important to the UAE. So peaceful coexistence, environmental issues around pollution, waste and climate, energy, food security, and financial literacy, because there was a lot of debt in young people, so they're really worried about finance. And there were some topics and links to subjects. And this is the framework that I've used both within the UK and in the UAE. You always start with the core. This is the question about why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What's our ethos? There are a number of sustainable development concepts that we can use. Then you think about your teaching and learning activities. And finally, you start to think about your outcomes and skills. Now, some people start on the outside and then move in. And either way, it doesn't really matter, so long as you cover all 4 areas of the circle. So the core, the question is, what is driving the focus on sustainable development? So why in your school or your region or your RCE do you want to do this? What are there some specific issues that you need to address? And what's relevant locally to you? And it's very important to think about these sustainable development concepts. These came out of Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister of the UK, set up something called the Sustainable Development Education Panel in 1998, and they sat for 5 years. And one of the things that came out was a document that talked about what are the sustainable development concepts that you ought to be trying to teach, and then how do you teach that across the ages. It's a very useful document, and it's on the SEED website. But the concepts were interdependence, citizenship and stewardship, future generations, diversity, both biological and cultural, quality of life now and in the future, thinking about change, but sustainable change, and very importantly, thinking about uncertainty and precaution. So if we don't really know what we're doing, how do we operate to work better? And then some useful teaching and learning activities that help lead to change. And one of the ones you'll see in here is I haven't put a lesson where you teach sustainability. I put socially critical thinking. So this is where you might have something about sustainability, but actually you're going to ask some socially critical questions like, how did we get here living unsustainably? Again, understanding change, outdoor learning, systems thinking, action learning, which we've talked a lot about, social learning. So we talked a little bit about working with intergenerations and working with businesses. And the idea about social learning, as lots of people have talked about, is that it helps you think creatively and think differently, because you're going to have to talk to people who you've never spoken to before. And that leads to some really fantastic new thinking and creativity, making it very participatory. So maybe the content is driven by the interest of the students. And finally, futures thinking. And this is the thing that really helps people not get depressed and leads to thinking about the future. And there are different ways of doing that, but the work by David Hicks in the UK is really fantastic on that. And then your outcomes and skills, this could come from, this comes actually from the UNECE, which is a European-wide network. And they've come up with a list of competencies for teachers, but they would be easily transferred to students. So your outcomes and skills and learning are around being, knowing, doing, and being able to live and work. And that seemed a very clear way to explain it in UAE. Very participatory. It turned out we had an artist amongst us who's well known and award winning, and he drew some fantastic cartoons for us. So this is one of them where we looked at sustainability citizens. What might that look like? What might their knowledge be, their skills, their attitudes, their values? We looked a lot at competencies, and we used the 7 key concepts. We took 6 of them, and we put across the top learning to be, learning to know, learning to do, and being able to work and live. And here were some of the competencies inside. So, for example, quality of life and learning to do, active in socially positive projects, establishing funds for low-income students. That was one example for them. Sustainable change, it could be around engaging with new technologies and being mindful to issues such as obsolescence. Citizenship and stewardship, being responsible for establishing peace and security in the UAE. That was a really big issue for them. So we created it from a participatory workshop, and from there we then put that onto a document for them, which is that now their competencies. Oops, I've gone too far. We talked about the approaches to learning. This is the David Hicks model. You think about the past, the present, probable and preferable, but how do you go from a probable future, which might not be great, and the steps you might take to getting to a preferable future. We talked a lot about action learning projects, and the point I've been making is that you don't take an action learning project once, you do it again and again and again. And some people call that double loop learning, but I would just keep going. And that's what's been shown to build what's called action competencies in Denmark. They came up with some research that showed that this really builds fantastic project skills. We looked at cross-curricular topics, so that was the format for that. They chose them. We started to create some cross-curricular maps and some subject maps. But more than anything, what I was very excited about is that we started to look at inquiry-based projects. And finally, we looked at levels of evaluation. And this is from an organisation called Nesta in the UK. And this is really to help you understand and be very clear about what level of impact you're having with the work that you're taking up in your school or in the eco club that you're setting up. And this were the next steps that we suggested to them. So that was the case study of what we did, and it was actually part of the UN Decade End report. So you'll see it mentioned in the report at the end of the ESD decade that happened in Nagoya, which I attended, but they had actually found the UAE. I think UAE had submitted it, so it's known about internationally now. Great model. It took a long time. I think they thought that the best thing would be if we just wrote it for them, and we resisted that because writing something for another culture is not a great idea. But also by doing our participatory process with the Ministry of Education, or you could do it with the school or a region, really buys ownership and engagement. And so answering that previous question, how do you get the senior management on board? If you do a process like this, you will get them on board. If there's any time I can help with that, just let me know. I'd love to come to Malaysia again.
Thank you, Ann. You're always invited here in Malaysia. We'd love to have you. And we really I actually loved the framework that you've just shown about starting from the core, then going to the sustainability concepts, then starting looking at the teaching and learning activities, and then the outcome, the skills. Because sometimes we start looking at the teaching and learning activities and what type of projects do I need to do. Sometimes we really don't think about the core question, why we're doing this and what are the main issues.
Yeah. So and it's really worth doing that at the beginning, because when I started at WWF UK in 2000, I brought together 50 schools that have been doing sustainability with WWF UK over 10, 15 years. And what I learned was that all of the schools just went from one project to another. They had not actually thought about why they were doing each project and how that was working. And so that opportunity to reflect and work together as a team is crucial because it helps sustain your work. And you're not then dependent on someone else telling you what to do. You start to own it as a school, and that's the way that you bring your senior management team on board.
Absolutely. And we have some questions from the previous question and answer session, so maybe I can read them to you. So
yeah, great.
We am aware of the time. It's 3:10 here. We should be finishing in 10 minutes the latest. So I'll read you a couple of questions and then probably we'll need to close because also most of online participants might be able, might need to do other things. So another question was, okay, let's say my school has none of this set up. And I think that this question came when you were mentioning about the things that school might already have, like an environmental council. So let's say that my school has nothing of this set up. How do you start from scratch? Out of the 10 tips, so the 10 tips of the previous presentation, should we start from tip number 1? Or is it
no, they're not in order. I would, and this is how we did it in the UK, I would start with a survey or a staff meeting where you start to list and think about what sustainability is, both environmental, social, and economic. And you start to think about, there may be something about climate change in geography, for example, or a social sciences subject. There may be something about change and history. There's definitely going to be something in Islamic studies, for example, because it might be something in the values. It might be about the care agenda. It could be a whole range of things. And so you might not yet call it sustainability, but there will be some stuff that's already being done by the school. And a meeting with all the school and the teachers together and starting to think about where do we talk about, and don't use the word sustainability, but where do we talk about care for ourselves, care for others, care for the environment. Where do we talk about economics? Where do we talk about biodiversity? Where do we talk about nature? Anything that is a good starting point, and start to map that and use one of the maps. So I would always start with that first of all, and then go back and think about your vision and your ethos. But start with where people, because once people realize that they're already doing something, they're more likely to engage. And you just, you might not be doing a school council yet. You might not have a project. You might not do anything on World Environment Day. You might not even have, I don't know if you do assemblies in Malaysian schools, but there may only be a few bits and pieces. But that's a good starting point, and it shows that it's one of the worries that teachers have is that they think this is a subject that they've got to learn before they can teach, and it's not. This is an engagement process across the school, teachers, students, management. And if you can think about it that way, rather than thinking about at the starting point and get people engaged, then you'll see what they would like to do next and first. So you don't have to have the answers. It's great when you get people together because they'll come up with something. They always do.
Yeah, you're right. And it's true that sometimes we feel that we need to know before we can actually start doing. And perhaps it's just you have to go there and start engaging people and then listen to them and see how we can do the projects together. Right, we have a couple of more questions. One which is really straightforward, which is who should we focus first to change? So who is the first one to engage in change? So the teacher or the students?
Well, my preference would be the students because that's how I've always worked, and I think it can be quite slow trying to engage with the teachers because they're busy. They've got their subject area. Teachers under, I don't know if it's the same in Malaysia, but certainly here in the UK, they're under a huge amount of pressure. They really don't have very much spare time. And so much change is being thrown at them. If you come again with another bit of change, they will find that hard. So if you can start with the students, but then think about how you make it easy, how you make the life of the teachers easier, that will get them on board. But start with the students always. It's their future.
Okay, that's good advice then. But we have 2 more questions, but perhaps we have a couple of minutes to address. Okay, one which is, so the children seem to know the facts, so it's more about the knowledge of sustainability, but then the actions are something very different. This is not really a question, but I think is that that worry about, okay, we're giving lots of knowledge, but then we don't see that into their actions, which is probably what you were saying about awareness raising, etc.
Yeah, and that's what's called the knowledge action or value action gap. And the only way around that is to create projects for the students and to get them engaged in activities where they and they don't have to become, fantastic sustainability people where they, recycle everything and have no waste and use no energy, and love all animals and all people on the planet. I mean, while they're at school, they're learning how to do this. So the school is modeling a learning process, not, being the perfect sustainability citizen. So if you don't set a very high, that as the standard, if what you do is set instead that it's a journey that you're taking those students on, what they will remember is being part of a project. And once they can remember being part of a project where they, what you're hoping is that they will then remember the feeling of doing something and being able to touch that and say, okay, we had a go at this, we achieved this, we didn't achieve that. That is part of their learning and building them up as sustainability citizens. So again, it's all about action learning. So yes, the knowledge is fine, but then create some projects where they actually have a go at something and support them while they're doing it, rather than just tell them they've got to recycle or turn off the lights.
Yeah, that's very good advice, Joanne. I think it's probably time to close. I'm not going to summarize all your talk because I think it's very difficult because you've said lots of interesting things, but we will try to make a small summary and try to upload it in our website so people can have a look perhaps at the 10 top tips. And also, and this goes for all the participants, after the webinar series, we're going to try to have a small publication with all the different webinar talks. So you will be able to look at this publication at the end of the year. Also, we are recording all the webinar talks, and we will try to make them available for you on the website. So, to me, I think there's a problem with the sound now. Okay. To me, there's some keywords that I get from this webinar, which is action learning, inquiry-based, intergenerational learning, lots of support, lots of engagement, and start with the action and the students. So those to me are the key messages from what you've said today. So now I'd like to do the closing because it's a bit late and we have to go. First of all, I'd really like to thank all the participants who have connected today. Those who have disconnected, I'm really sorry because we had that little problem of the connection earlier. Thanks for your participation. Excuse me? Okay, 1 second. I think we have some problems with the sound.
Yes, no morning. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry, I'm back. I think that there was someone who had the microphone on, so we had a bit of I was just thanking everyone, especially Anne, for waking up so early this morning and sharing with us all of her perspectives and experience on this area. It's really been really useful to us. And I'm sure that now when we go upstairs, Amara and myself, to meet all the teachers and school managers who have met today, I'm sure that there will be lots of different ideas and ideas of implementing good and innovative projects. So again, thank you very much, Anne, and thank you very much to all the participants. We really look forward to meet you again in our next webinar, which is on 10th of April at the same time. So again, thanks to all, and hope to see you very soon. And do you want to say like the last?
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's difficult, not being able to see everyone's faces, but I hope that was useful, and I hope it was practical, because that's really, I think, what mostly teachers want is something practical. It's been great, and I might just go back to bed now.
That's good. Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone, and see you very soon.